Hi, everyone. Welcome. This is a Yin class. And as you're getting prepared to start, I want to invite you, if you can, to arrange yourself either close to a wall or close to a chair. Could be an office chair, could be couch, could be anything that you're going to sit on. You can do calves on a couch. I thought because this is recorded and we aren't necessarily doing this together, we're going to do a few poses that I typically wouldn't teach that are also yin poses. So we have an opportunity to kind of come in and out of them if we want to. And then also use the wall so you can set yourself up here in case when you arrive for a live class, it's a little bit tricky to do that. So we'll use some wall today for our earlier poses. Also, if you have blocks, blankets, pillows, grab those, have those handy. And then we are going to get started. Pause that video if you need to go grab some things or rearrange yourself. Otherwise, the invitation is to find a space to begin class in where you feel like your body can relax or at least be more at ease. And that can be any space where we're really trying to alleviate some muscle tension. And often that's resting on your back, your side, or your belly. But maybe there's another space, including if you have a chair or couch, that you would rather be resting in. And as you're finding your way to that space, as you begin to settle in, maybe taking a few of those deeper inhales and those longer exhales settling into the weight of the body where you're connected to the floor. And this space we're settling into really models for our brain what it is like to be at ease in our body. Not a lot of muscle firing here. An opportunity to get really grounded, perhaps by being, most of your body resting on the ground. That's very grounding. And this idea of witnessing what is connected to the ground. So take a few moments. Just notice what part of you is connected to your mat, to the floor, to the earth. And we're letting that breath be just nice and easy. It's traveling as it chooses. No real effort to breath. And then pausing for a moment just to notice what might be present for you. What's present in that physical body? Is there sensation that's gaining your notice? What might be present in the thinking mind or the emotional bodies, thoughts or emotions we might be experiencing? And noting these sensations with curiosity. Trying to leave all of those questions out of it, that self-judgment out of it. Just noticing what is. Drawing your awareness to your breath, and without changing breath, just noticing the path of the breath. So as you're breathing in, where do you feel that breath expand into? And as you exhale, does there come with that exhale a sense of ease or perhaps a sensation of what we often call as deflation? We might inflate on the inhale and deflate on the exhale. Maybe you're experiencing that breath more in the sense of temperature or friction in the nose, the throat. Noticing the path of the breath without changing the rhythm of the breath. And today, if it's helpful, because we might be moving through a fewer of our more unfamiliar poses, we might remind ourselves that we can exhale by just 1 or 2 extra beats. So you might observe the breath here for 3 or 4 breaths. Maybe you already know the number of beats it takes you to breathe in, but if you don't, take these next 3 or 4 breaths just to count for yourself the number of beats it takes you to breathe in. And often that number will vary. Anytime through our practice, if a particular pose feels uncomfortable or somewhat challenging, using that slightly longer exhale, we take that number we just found, that number of beats it takes us to breathe in, and we exhale by just 1 or 2 extra beats. So for instance, usually takes me about 5 beats to breathe in. I would try to exhale for 6 or 7. We're going to begin to wiggle around a little bit to get a little bit of movement into the body, maybe to stretch. And as you're getting ready to come up into seated, if you aren't already there, we're going to do one. This is more of a Bernie Clark idea. He's one of the gurus of Yin Yoga. We're going to be doing a standing pose. I know I always say in Yin, we rarely or never do a standing pose. We are going to do one standing pose. There are some contraindications because we are going to be in a forward fold. So if you have any eye pressure issues, meaning glaucoma, anything bugging your eyes in the form of pressure, including Graves' disease, we want to make sure you're actually seated in a forward fold. So you would be in your caterpillar instead. You could support the head. If you have a history of stroke, we don't want to be hanging upside down for this length of time. You want to do the same forward fold. Contraindications, eye pressure issues, history of stroke, maybe some rotator cuff stuff, because this one can get a little bit challenging for the shoulder. So if you find that it is, feel free to come into that seated forward fold. You can always have blocks underneath the buns too. So we're going to stand up. And this is where a wall comes in really handy. So I usually tuck myself up against that wall so my buns have an opportunity to be right up against it. I don't have to worry about balancing as I'm folding forward. As you know, I'm not great at balancing. We're only, and I say only, we're only going to do this one for 2 minutes. And before you forward fold, I'm going to demonstrate it for you. So the idea is that we're going to keep the knees fairly soft. If you've been in a yawn class for me, they're going to be bent. I mean, you can't see it, but I got my buns up here against my wall, which is my Murphy bed. And I'm either going to hold on to my elbows or let my arms dangle. And I'm doing my very best to let my head drop. So coming into a forward fold, maybe using something behind you to help support your balance, or coming into a seated forward fold if you're working with any contraindications, and deciding here if you want to kind of wrap those arms, hang on to the opposite elbow, almost like we're doing our ragdoll. If we were in a yawn class, more movement, or arms can dangle. Now, the place that's more than likely going to be really stubborn here is your head and the back of your neck. So ask yourself if in this forward fold, wherever you're at, if you're able to look through your legs, it might be thighs, knees, could be shins. We're doing our best here not to be gazing at the floor, which is a really tight neck. But the brain doesn't so much like this forward fold where we can't see what's coming at us. So you might find it keeps trying to tighten the back of that neck. So officially called dangling, cleverly named. It's a great one for an entire backside body stretch. What I do like about this one is we're getting some traction to the spine by hanging upside down for 2 minutes. We might get some release through this neck and shoulder area. So our shoulders are
The only time they get to drop towards our ears with gravity versus coming up into those ears with tension. I mentioned anybody working with rotator cuff. Sometimes just a simple lengthening and dangling of the arms can be irritating. I know we don't have movement, but we're definitely in a space that we aren't in for very long during the day. I guess unless you are a handstander or a circus, I don't know, performer, maybe you're upside down more. So if you start to get sensations of discomfort that are leading to pain, it's okay to come down to the floor and be in that forward fold. Now we're going to be careful here, especially if you don't have something to lean against. Be very careful as you're coming up. And I'm going to just stair step up first to my knees. And I'm going to rise up into a standing position. If you're seated, you're going to rise and restack that spine. And just take a minute here, not a full minute, but a moment, let's say, to let all that blood rush back down. Might even check in with shoulders, maybe a little bit of that torso. That one for me is really powerful. And often it's uncomfortable for me. We are going to continue to use the wall, but maybe more in a traditional way first. So for those of us who are standing, we're going to come on down to the floor. We're going to be doing a series of 3 different poses, and I want to demonstrate those to you before you get up in them so you're not cranking your neck. So take just a pause here to watch me. If you're able to go up on that wall, maybe again, it's a couch or a chair, we're going to tuck our hip in and we're going to lean back on our hands and we essentially cartwheel up. Now, our first pose, a little more familiar to you perhaps, is our number 4 stretch. And we begin with the right leg. Well, we'll be crossing it over. And of course, we'll switch to the left. That opposite leg will slide down so we get that outside of the hip stretch. That'll be our first pose. Our second pose, we're going to come back, legs straight up the wall, and then we're going to go into a half dragonfly. Total dragonfly would be legs out, and you could do that in a forward fold. So it would be letter V legs. Half dragonfly is going to get us a little bit deeper, which is why we're only going to hold it for 3 minutes. So our right leg would go out, left knee would bend, heel comes into your core. That might feel way too big. And if it feels way too big, come into your butterfly. You will hold butterfly for a total of 6 minutes. Okay. That is where we're headed. And then we'll come into one in symmetry, which is knees into the chest, but that's easier to explain, not so visual. So I'm going to invite you, if it's possible, to come onto the wall. If you happen to have a couch or a chair handy, it's your left calf that goes on and you cross that right thigh over. If you don't have any of that handy, you can always lay on your back and draw that knee in. So similar to what we would do if we're not able, because of hip structure, to do sleeping swan. So beginning with our number 4 stretch on the wall. Now, I always like to toss this idea out because some of us have a hip structure that might allow for more of a midline cross. So rather than just crossing ankle over, you actually might get your knees to stack one on top of the other. And then we let that leg, that straight leg, draw down the wall. So that's a possibility. And I can tell while I'm resting here, I would really appreciate something underneath my head. I'm on a little bit of a lift here for my yoga mat. So I'm going to place a blanket or a block on behind my head to see if I can get a little bit of release. Arms are comfortable, wherever that may be. Maybe they're down by the side. Maybe it's T, maybe even overhead while we stretch this right outside hip and glute structure. 3 minutes on each side. Or you're here resting. Could be legs up the wall, could be resting on your back or with your calf on the couch. The reason we use the wall is really to allow us to go around what we call hard compression. And we're not all in hard compression in our hip structures, but I do occasionally enjoy this particular stretch instead of sleeping swan. It's a little less compression on both my knee and the front crease of my hip. But for many of us, because of the way the head of our femur and that ball comes into the socket and the size of the socket and the depth of the socket, and maybe the openness of the socket, we just aren't able to access this while we're on the mat. This is a great way to modify to go around with the hard compression where two bones are meeting and just squeezing the heck out of the tissue in between, and access what for some of us isn't accessible. If we were in a regular yoga class, or if we weren't, using a lot of props in order to do this. Props are good. You can always use props. But this is kind of that fast way anytime you might need that outside hip stretch. We've got walls everywhere. We can always practice this one on the wall. If it's feeling uncomfortable, that slightly longer exhale. We use that right ankle crossing over first in order to make sure we're working with the digestive system in harmony, both how it travels physically and energetically. And I'm guessing if you happen to be watching the screen, I'm actually backwards. The idea there is that I'm trying to work with my body energetically appropriate as well. If I thought I had a hard time mirroring while I'm sitting up, try upside down against the wall. I'm never quite sure what it looks like. We're going to send both feet back up the wall. If you're resting on your back, you might take a moment just to stretch them long to rest on the mat. If you need to wiggle around, take your time wiggling around. And then when you're ready, we're going to switch sides. So it is the left ankle that would cross over the top of the thigh. We slide that right foot down the wall. You might even have knees stacked here, or you're resting on your back, drawing that crossing that left ankle over, and then drawing that right knee into the chest. Creating some hopefully more pliable tissue through that iliotibial band that runs on the outside of your thigh, some glute stuff, maybe some piriformis connective tissue as well. And for a few of us, we might even experience some hamstring connective tissue release. So the muscle, but really the tendon associated with each of the hamstrings. There are 3 of them in the back of the leg. And as you're settling in, an opportunity to notice how this side might feel compared to the other. What are those similarities or differences? Noticing those similarities or differences with curiosity. When you're ready, both legs stretch up towards the ceiling, giving it a good little wiggle. This next one, this will be our half dragonfly. And this is where I want to encourage anybody with SI joint dysfunction. You're going to be much more symmetrical. You're going to be butterfly, soles of feet together, knees drop out. the outsides of your feet are resting on the wall. That is a safer space to be for your SI joint. So if you know that applies to you, your sacroiliac joint, hang out in butterfly, also an option if this one feels too intense. We're going to kick your right leg straight out. It's going to slide down that wall. Your left leg will bend. The heel comes in towards your pelvic floor or core. Now, this can be a fairly intense pose. I've got us here for 3 minutes, but if 3 minutes feels too long, you're experiencing pain in the back of the knee, discomfort, first thing you do is actually soften that knee. And you might find that it was plenty of time. 1 minute was plenty of time. So you might come right back through center and butterfly. Butterfly or legs up the wall, always that space that you would return to relax. I like this one on the wall because it can be quite a lot more intense than when we're in full dragonfly and folding forward. So right now we've got a lot of gravity and the weight of the leg opening the connective tissue, the inner thigh. If you're experiencing again in the back of the knee, soften the knee a little bit because we're also getting that connective tissue in the back of the knee. There's a big convergence of connective tissue back there. If it's uncomfortable, this may be the space where you use that slightly longer exhale. And if you ever wondered how your connective tissue is releasing with gravity, this is usually when we're on the wall and you feel that heel slide down quickly. It might release a millimeter, it might release an inch quickly down the wall. That is connective tissue that is releasing, becoming more pliable. And because these poses might be fairly new to some of us, or it's been a while, you might just observe. Typically, we are doing this in a forward fold. We're seated on our buns. How is the experience here on the wall versus that forward fold? This is one of the poses I do, and I'm experiencing some of that mystery low back pain. For me, my hip structure is such that my bones allow me to very much externally rotate to turn my toes out, but I don't internally rotate very far. So my hip socket is sort of aiming out, and it's more of a latte cup. So I get really tight and weak inner thighs. And that creates for me a lot of issues with my low back. So this is one I do almost daily. Almost daily, you can walk into my house and see me up on the wall in some form or fashion. Let's bring both legs back up towards the ceiling. So we're going to go here for about 30 seconds of symmetry for all of us with feet long or legs long and feet aiming up towards the ceiling. And giving yourselves a couple of breaths. And again, just a reminder to anybody working with SI joint dysfunction, a better place for you to be is soles of the feet together, outsides of the feet resting on the wall in butterfly. If you're ready, we're going to drop now that left leg out while your right heel comes in towards your core. We'll be 3 minutes on this side, softening the knee if it feels very intense behind that knee. You're going to see, well, maybe, you're up on the wall too. But for me, because I do have a little bit of SI joint dysfunction on this side, I'm actually going to place a block underneath my thigh so my leg doesn't go too far. And it's adjusting to sides. So one side, really, it doesn't matter how far it goes. The other leg, if it goes too far, it's going to irritate my SI joint.
As you're settling into this space, maybe a moment to notice how this side feels compared to the other. Again, that quick release, that heel sliding down the wall, not unusual. Might go for what feels like a good distance, maybe an inch, half an inch, but maybe just a tiny little slide down that wall in increments as connective tissue becomes more pliable. Let's carefully draw that leg back up towards the ceiling, both feet either up towards the ceiling or letting soles of feet slide down so knees are coming in towards either the chest or the underarms. About 2 minutes, straight legs up the wall or knees, feet sliding down the wall, knees coming either in towards as if they're going to shave off your ears, or maybe they go frame the outsides of your rib cage with those thighs. Either place. So a little bit of symmetry coming back into the hip structure. We're going to begin to come off of the wall. If the legs are straight, go ahead and bend them. It's a little easier to get off the wall than on the wall. We just roll over to a hip. We then use our arms, hands to come on up into seated position. We are going to go into our deer pose, and that's really for the front of the thighs. And this is a space, if you've got some props available, you want to grab them, blocks, blankets, a pillow off the bed. Maybe you don't need any of those. If you're using a blanket, usually it's folded up in your hamburger bun. We're going to open it up And we're going to use our blocks as the hot dogs. So end to end goes in one side of your blanket, and you fold it up like you've got hot dogs in a hot dog bun. Okay. We are going to be twisting to your right side. So I'm going to place my props on the right side. Again, I hope I'm mirroring you. It's possible I'm not. My brain does not like all of this up and down on the walls. It's having a hard time adjusting. So if you can put your stuff on your right side, we're going to place it over there, and then we're going to send the feet out in front of you. We're going to drop knees over to the right side. It's going to be your left leg that walks back. So it's kind of sending the heel back towards the bun cheek. And then we're going to twist to the right. And we're just aligning these homemade bolsters or blocks or pillows with your torso. So however far you get is how far you get. We're not trying to push it any great distance here. We're going to twist, and then we're going to go ahead and lower our torso down. I'm going to be a little bit careful here because of my microphone. If you would like to play around with a twist through the neck, you can rest on the right or left cheek. One side is going to give you much more of a twist through the neck. The other one feels a bit more neutral. You could also, and I tend to do this, is rest my chin on either my homemade bolster or my hands. That's often because I'm talking. So you might play with that and see if that feels appropriate. If you're not feeling a lot of stretch in front of that left thigh, walk your heel a little closer back towards your buns. A big twist, not just for the torso, but really addressing this front of the thigh. An opportunity to get some of that connective tissue, all four muscles there, your quads, and maybe even a little bit of your tensor fascia latae, which is a nice little kind of spiral muscle that's also a somewhat of a hip flexor. Getting those and their associated connective tissues a little bit more pliable. This tends to be quite a tight area for many of us. Also, another big culprit of that mystery low back pain is tight quads, quadriceps, and tight iliopsoas. I'm going to be fairly quiet through this twisting series. This one can be, for many of us, because we've got deep pressure on the belly, because we're in a twist, can be very relaxing, or at least feel like we're bringing a bit more ease into the body. I'm trying to take thinking mind out of the equation by not chatting too much. When you're ready, we're going to use our hands first to press into the floor to rise up and then come out of that twist. A little easier on that back. We're going to send the feet, or I should say the knees, over to the other side. So now we'll just let them flop on over to the other side. We bring our props with us. That didn't work, did it? So let's go over. It never works when I'm recording. I always do something goofy, don't I? All right. So we're twisting now over to that left side. And again, I might be opposite of you. Twisting to that left side, we're walking our right leg back. And we'll let our torso land on those blocks as they do, our homemade bolster. Maybe we don't need that at all. Perhaps it's a pillow instead. You might make it all the way down to the floor. This, again, actually has a lot to do with bones. It has something to do with flexibility, but it's how your rib cage and pelvis are also related. How short-waisted or long-waisted you might be. A couple other factors go into how far you can twist to one side. You can pick which cheek you would like to rest on, or perhaps you'd rather just be resting with your chin in a neutral position on top of your hands. Pardon me. And if we're not feeling a whole lot of stretch in that front of the thigh, that right thigh, you might walk your heel back a little bit further. A 5-minute hold on this side. Our other holds have been between 3 and 2 minutes just because they're can be quite challenging. This one, I'm hopeful again, as I mentioned, that it's more relaxing. So we do that full 5-minute hold. Any pose can be held. I wouldn't hold them less than 2 minutes. Usually takes about 3 minutes for most bodies for that connective tissue to start to become more pliable. You're going to hold them as little as 2 to 3 minutes. You can hold them longer than 5 minutes. You might take a moment to notice as you've eased into this pose for a few minutes, how it might feel compared to the other side, those similarities or differences. We're going to release the pose by first pressing into the palms, coming up, and then untwisting out of the pose. We are going to come to rest on our backs. So as you're getting situated, moving props around, if it's helpful to have a blanket or a block underneath your head, you might use that. We're going to go into one of two poses here. We're either going to go into happy baby, or we're going to go into knees into chest. Now, if neither of those sound very appealing because the front crease of your thigh is just done and it's been, too compressed, you can hang out as always in constructive rest pose. Nothing bad ever happened in constructive rest pose, where the feet are wide, the knees drop towards each other. You can wrap your arms around your heart. All of that is going to relax and release the spine. If you're doing knees into chest, you can draw them in either towards the chest or a little bit further or wider out towards the underarms. And our happy baby is where we're reaching what we can reach. Sometimes it's the back of the thighs, somewhere along the leg, meaning the lower leg shin area, or maybe inside or outside of the feet. So what feels best here? Happy baby, knees into the chest, or maybe you move into constructive rest pose. And this is one we're going to hold for 5 minutes. Maybe that I should have told you that before to help you determine where you're going to go. Sometimes a happy baby for 2 minutes, not so hard. Maybe a happy baby for 5 minutes feels a little bit more intense. Both of these are going to hopefully release a little bit more of the low back and relax the psoas, that iliopsoas, that pairing of muscles that goes from the front crease of your thigh to your low back. We relax, or at least bring more ease into that muscle, which tends to be tight, whether it's firing a lot or whether we're sedentary, because it gets shortened quite a bit when we're seated. And both of these poses have an element of inner thigh, perhaps, and back of the thigh release as well. We might check in with breath here as we are compressing a bit of the space the breath might travel into, belly, a little bit of that rib cage. You might notice if you're feeling your breath expand into other areas, different places than when we began class and we were noticing the path of the breath. It's possible, it's not. It's possible it's traveling the very same spot, but it might be worth witnessing to see how it's changed, where it might be traveling if it has changed. We're going to begin to release. If you have been in compression in the front of those thighs, you might take a moment just to stretch those legs long. Give them a good little wiggle. We are going to begin to find our way into final relaxation. And because this is a recorded video, I want to actually leave you some time for relaxation. So hopefully you think if I timed this right, we would have about 10 full minutes for your hour's worth, and maybe even a few more minutes. And you know my philosophy. I would love for you to rest here for a full 15 minutes. I also know we're on video and maybe you're done, so you don't have to tell me, right? Maybe you could say you relaxed, but didn't. If you have the opportunity, as you're finding your way into your final relaxation space, to rest for about 10 minutes, that would be ideal. This idea of allowing the body's tissue to figure out how to not only, become more pliable, but allow our prana life force energy to flow through it and to go to the places that might not have been nourished for a while because of that tight tissue. That's what relaxation can help us do. So when you're finding that space of ease, if you are going to stay longer and it's cold in the room you're resting in, make sure you have a blanket. If you love to have something over your eyes or behind your head, you can rest on your back, your belly, your side, legs up the wall. We'll do a few of those settling breaths, and then I'm going to quietly log off. Hopefully you don't have to worry about what's happening with your computer. The video just ends. I will wish you wellness for this week that I don't see you. So you might try those deeper inhales, those longer exhales, settling into the weight of the body where you're connected to the floor. And when those feel complete, inviting the body to breathe itself and the mind to quiet. letting yourself rest in this ease and sense of even well-being that you've cultivated this hour for as long as you choose.